I'm Jay Horton. I make movies that make money, and this is Filmmakers On. Today, I got a little extra interview with Rob Hardy. I did a full hour-long interview with him that's going to be dropping next month. And I had this little 10-minute section where we were talking a lot about filmmaking gurus and, changing other filmmakers' mindsets. So enjoy my conversation with Rob Hardy.
There's just so much sort of bullshitty advice in the indie film business space that may or may not have been true 10 to 15 years ago, but is still peddled as reality, as a fact. And I just can't take it anymore, man. And you're the only person I see anywhere, maybe other than Alex Ferrari, who's doing something different and actually exploring the edges and figuring out how to take advantage of new opportunities instead of doubling down on just old systems and old ways of doing business that clearly don't serve anybody anymore, least of all filmmakers.
Yeah, I think one of the major problems with filmmakers, and Alex Ferrari has said this before, but, a lot of us, especially, some of us older cats, we came up in the 90s, with that independent, Tarantino, Rodriguez, Spike Lee explosion. And we just, we're expecting those kind of results, like we're expecting to come out to Hollywood and do a movie, like one movie, and it's just going to blow up, and everybody. And then on the other hand, all the other filmmakers, like they're still looking at that, I want to make big studio pictures. And, there's a wide range of different types of filmmakers and different types and sizes of movies. I mean, there's a whole industry just for micro budget films.
You could tell me if you've experienced this as well, but one of my big frustrations over the past 2 years in particular, where I've really been focusing on business and marketing and entrepreneurship for indie filmmakers, is that, I don't know, it's hard to quantify, but 95% plus are totally closed off to even the notion of taking the reins on those things, because they're still so emotionally bought in to the old way of doing things. They read Rebel Without a Crew when they were, I don't know, in college or high school, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's still, like, even though the world has just dramatically changed since any of that worked, they're still emotionally bought into the narrative. And I've realized that so much of my job, and part of the reason that I have frustrations right now, is that my job is just changing people's minds and changing their hearts about what they want. And that's a really frustrating place to be.
Yeah, I know, speaking just for myself, I mean, I moved out to Los Angeles in 2005, I think. I just finished my first movie, super low budget horror movie. And I thought when I got out here, like, I still had that. I was going to be the next Robert Rodriguez thing. I was going to be a big filmmaker. I was going to be making these studio movies. And let me preface what I'm saying here too. Like, I'm not saying that that's not still a goal, that I don't want to make bigger movies or I don't want to make studio stuff, and I'm not shitting on anybody that does. But there's a whole other realm out there. There's an infinite number of ways to make your living as a filmmaker. It doesn't just have to be on big slick studio stuff. You can make small independent films and make a living.
Maybe the weird irony of that is that by getting to a place where like, my whole thing is building audiences for the long term, so it's not just focusing on one project and then abandoning everything you've done and moving to the next.
Yeah.
But building a relationship with an audience over time and getting to a place where you can sustainably live from that. It's also the kind of thing that attracts opportunities from industry players, because you become less risky. You have a direct means of communication and a direct means of profiting from your work without them. And it makes you more of a sure bet. So when you come to the negotiating table, so to speak, not only do you have more leverage, but you're more likely to get favorable deals, to get more financing and investment, to come away with distribution deals that aren't a pile of hot garbage. Coincidentally, by taking this DIY route, more often than not, you're more prepared to succeed in the industry apparatus. I don't know what you would call it. And you can walk away from the clownishness of it and the really, like, predatory side of it if it doesn't serve you, because you have a better option. I don't know. I'm just constantly amazed by the way these two sides of the coin, and there's probably more ways to do it, but they're not mutually exclusive. That's another one of these, I don't know, just themes that I'm constantly trying to just hammer home, is that creating a body of work over time, even if it's a bunch of tiny ass little shorts. Like I don't know. I love microfilms or micro shorts or whatever you'd call them, these little 1 minute, 5 minute projects, but they increase the surface area for opportunity coming into your life. Whereas if you spend 2 years, 3 years hunkered down on a feature where nobody really knows what you're doing, you don't have any proof of your work available in the world. And then obviously making money from a feature film that you've spent 3 years on is generally a shitty proposition just all the way around. But there's really something to this idea that putting out a lot of work and being prolific is what attracts real opportunities. But so many filmmakers have been conditioned into this like go big or go home mindset that ultimately is really self-defeating.
Yeah. And as I was saying, it took me, probably, 15 years. It took me making movies for that to really sink in. I mean, I was doing it anyway. I was like, okay, I'm going to make something rather than nothing. But I wasn't necessarily happy in the earlier part of my career making those little movies. I wanted to make bigger movies, and I felt like this was less than. And it took me several years to change my mindset. I was definitely, if you would take me then, put me now, I'd be a hater on my channel or your site, just the same as some of these other guys.
I don't know. I think that's kind of like an impulse that just comes with the territory of being a creative. Is we all of us grew up watching the same filmmakers having really good taste. Like that's often what gets us into doing this in the first place. And it can be really hard to disconnect that taste that we have from the expectations that we have of ourselves in our work.
Right.
Ultimately, it's letting go of those expectations and creating regardless, and creating prolifically and consistently that actually gets you to that place where you've built up your skills, your network, your all of this to the place where you can really outpace anything that you would have done otherwise. But I don't know, it's sort of a weird philosophical thing. It's like you have to let go of high expectations in order to ever get anywhere near them.
Right. And I think it's important to quantify by saying we're letting go of high expectations. We are trying to do the best that we can. We are trying to make the best work that we can make, the most polished work that we can make, but we are not, keeping those I'm going to make a movie that looks like a $20 million movie. I'm not going to make a studio movie.
What's the phrase? It's something like start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Right. It's always stretching the ability that you have with your current circumstances and resources. And just by the nature of pushing those bounds little by little, you get to the place where you have more resources and more to work with and better skills to be able to execute on these, lofty visions that so many of us have.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that there's no, I don't see any positive outcome to not making movies because you don't have your budget. I want to do this movie, but I don't have the budget, so I'm just not going to make anything. Well, okay, maybe you don't have enough money to shoot that movie, but what can you shoot? Shoot something. Because I just did an interview with this guy, Dan Lotz. He talks about folk filmmaking. And he went out and made 3 improv features where he's pretty much the only actor. He had a friend helping him with camera sometimes, made them for $300-$400, but they look great. They're good stories. And he just went out and did it. He didn't wait for anybody to say, oh, here, let me give you permission to make this. Let me give you the money to make this. He just went and did it.
What's folk filmmaking? What does that mean? Is that the niche he goes into, or is it like a filmmaking style, or
Yeah, it's kind of a new. I don't want to use the word dogma, but you remember Van Trier, Dogma film.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's like that. They don't really have a set of rules, but they're kind of make movies at all costs.
Gotcha.
And they release them a lot of times free source, say on YouTube, with it might be monetized, but there's no rental, there's no SVOD or TVOD or any of that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the purpose, he's trying to, again, just like you said, he's building his audience, to a point where he can monetize that in a bigger way, and he's not. None of them are adverse to say trying Amazon or something like that, but they want to build their audiences first on something like YouTube.
Creative restrictions lead to just like unbounded creativity. When you give yourself these guardrails that you have to work within, it focuses you in a way that very little else can. And it's one of the things that like we're talking about, just it gets you to the point where you make work and get it out into the world without constantly going down the perfectionist rabbit hole of, oh, I need to make this better. Oh, I need to spend the next 9 months looking for investors so that I can finish this in post. Like,
Yeah, I think there's a point when you're making films professionally, right? Like regardless of your budget, and it happens on big movies all the time. They have schedules. There's a certain point where as an artist, you got to say, this is good enough, or this is as good as it's going to get. It doesn't mean you don't push it and do the best you can, but you get to a certain point where, like, I've been editing for 20 years, and there's a point in an edit, like, where you're just making changes. You're not making it better anymore. You're just making changes. And I think that holds for, the film as a whole.
So that was a pretty fun conversation. So yeah, check out his website, Filmmaker Freedom. But whatever you do, keep making movies.